I thought night security was about watching empty hallways until the person on the camera vanished the moment I rewound. When I went back to the live feed, they were closer, like the building was moving them forward every time I looked. Story 1. Someone was always one camera ahead. On my first night at the business center, the supervisor told me two things that felt like jokes until they didn't. First, he said, the cameras lag sometimes, so don't trust the timestamp more than your own eyes. Second, he said, if you ever see a person in the building after 1 a.m., you treat it like an intruder until proven otherwise, because the cleaning crews are gone and the tenants don't have access that late. He didn't say anything about what to do if the cameras show an intruder who stops existing the moment you rewind. The site was a glass and steel office complex outside the city, 2 main towers connected by a sky bridge with a small lobby that smelled like sanitizer and espresso residue. At night, it turned into a museum of empty professionalism. Glossy floors, framed photos of smiling teams, and a silence that made every mechanical sound feel personal. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I worked alone. The job was mostly routine, which is why it was perfect for my life at the time. I needed predictable hours, a little money, and a place where no one expected conversation. The security office sat behind the front desk. Inside were 3 monitors, a radio base station, a logbook, and a wall panel that showed door contacts in green and red. I was given a key ring heavy enough to feel like a responsibility, and a printed route. Tower A floors 1 to 3, Skybridge. Tower B floors 1 to 2, back to the lobby. Then a perimeter check of the underground garage. Repeat every 2 hours, more often if the sensors ping. The first few rounds were uneventful. The cameras showed nothing but empty corridors and the occasional flutter of an HVAC vent.
Motion alerts came when a moth drifted too close to a lens, or when a lobby plant cast a shadow in the wrong direction. I made coffee, wrote "all clear" in the logbook, and let the monitors become background. At 1:12 a.m., a motion alert popped up for camera B2-07, the hallway outside the conference suites on the 2nd floor of Tower B. The feed switched automatically to highlight the alert, and I saw a person walking past the lens. Not a blur, not a shadow, a person. They moved at a steady pace, head slightly angled down, like someone who knew where they were going. They wore something dark and non-reflective, and in the cold overhead lighting, they looked less like an intruder and more like an employee who'd stayed late and forgotten the rules. I leaned closer, my hand already moving to the radio out of habit. The figure crossed the frame, disappeared around the corner, and the motion alert icon stopped flashing. I rewound the footage 10 seconds to confirm what I'd seen. The hallway was empty. I watched the rewind again, slower. Empty corridor, silent doors, the faint shimmer of polished tile. No person, no shadow, nothing. I felt a small wave of embarrassment, the kind you feel when you scare yourself for no reason. I told myself I'd seen a compression artifact, a light glitch, the camera changing exposure. I let the footage return to live and sat back. The person was there again. They were in the same hallway, but now closer to the camera, moving in the opposite direction, as if they'd turned around in the time I had rewound. They passed beneath a ceiling light, and for a moment their outline sharpened. I saw shoulders, a narrow frame, the swing of one arm. I rewound again. Empty. Live again. The person was there, and this time they stopped in front of a conference room door and turned their head, slowly, directly toward the camera. No face details, not enough resolution for that, but the gesture was unmistakable. They looked like they were making eye contact. The hairs on my arms lifted.
I didn't like the thought of someone aware of the cameras, aware of me watching, treating the system like a conversation. I grabbed the radio. "Control to any unit, do you copy?" I said, forgetting for a second that I was the only unit. My voice sounded too loud in the little office. Static answered. The base station light blinked once, then steadied. I stood up and forced myself into routine. Cameras can lie, I told myself. If there was someone on site, the only real way to confirm was to put eyes on the hallway. I took the key ring, my flashlight, and the radio, and stepped into the lobby. The building was emptier in person than it ever looked on camera. The air had that after-hours stillness, as if the rooms were holding their breath. My footsteps echoed off glass and tile, and the sound followed me too closely, like it wanted to stay attached. I rode the elevator to Tower B, second floor. The elevator mirror made me watch myself, and I hated how pale I looked under fluorescent light, like a person who belonged in a feed rather than a room. When the doors opened, the corridor was exactly as the camera had shown it. Clean, quiet, the conference suite doors shut and identical. I walked toward the camera's location, trying not to imagine the person just around the corner, waiting for me to commit. "Security," I called, keeping my voice steady. "If anyone's on this floor, identify yourself." Silence. I reached the camera. It sat high in the corner near the ceiling, its lens aimed down the hall. I looked where it looked. The hallway ahead was empty. The floor shone. The exit sign glowed green at the far end. Nothing moved. I keyed the radio. "Control, hallway B2 is clear," I said, because speaking the words made me feel like I had authority over them. Static again, but beneath it, I heard something else, faint and rhythmic, like a shoe scuffing tile. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from ahead of me.
It was behind me, closer to the elevator, where my footsteps had come from. I turned slowly. The corridor behind me was empty too, and yet the sound continued, a soft, patient scuff and pause, like someone practicing how to walk quietly, but not caring if they succeeded. I backed toward the elevator without taking my eyes off the empty hall. My hand found the call button. I pressed it. Nothing happened immediately. The building felt sluggish, like it was thinking about whether it wanted to cooperate. The scuffing sound stopped. In the silence that followed, a door contact beeped in my earpiece. The radio crackled and a voice came through. My voice. "Control to any unit, do you copy?" The words were exactly what I'd said in the office. Same cadence, same slight nervous lift at the end. Only now they were coming from the radio speaker in my hand, like the building had recorded me and decided the proper time to play it back was when I was alone in a corridor. My stomach turned cold. I stared at the radio as if it had betrayed me. The elevator dinged behind me, and the doors opened. I stepped in quickly. The doors started to close. As the gap narrowed, I saw movement at the far end of the corridor. A figure, half hidden by the corner, watching. They raised one arm slowly, not waving, not threatening, just lifting it to chest height. In the brief second before the door shut, I realized they weren't looking at me. They were looking past me, at the camera. The elevator doors closed, and for a second, the mirrored back wall showed my reflection, wide-eyed and sweating. Then the lights flickered, and my reflection lagged by a fraction of a second, as if the image needed time to catch up to me. I pressed the lobby button and held my breath until the elevator moved. Back in the security office, I did the thing I should have done first. I pulled up the camera feed and left it on live. I didn't rewind. I didn't blink. Camera B2-07 showed the corridor I had just left. Empty. Then, as if responding to my attention, a figure stepped into frame from the corner. They walked toward the camera with a slow certainty, stopping directly under it, head tilted up. They stood there a moment, still, like they were letting the camera drink in their presence. Then they lifted a hand and tapped the lens once. The image shivered. For half a second, the feed switched to a view of the security office, my office, shot from an impossible angle above the monitors. I saw myself sitting at the desk, frozen, staring at the screen. And behind my chair, just at the edge of the frame, a darker shape stood too close. The feed snapped back to the empty corridor. My body moved before my mind caught up. I shoved the chair back, stood, and spun around. Nothing was behind me. But my logbook, which I had left open on the desk, now had fresh ink on the page. A neat line written in block letters I didn't recognize. Stay on camera. I didn't finish that shift. I called my supervisor, told him there was a security issue, and left before he could ask questions. I didn't go back for my paycheck. I didn't want to sit in that office again and wonder whether the feed would show me from above, whether the building had learned my routines, whether every rewind was a permission slip. Weeks later, I looked at job listings and saw the same position posted again, phrased like a simple opportunity. Night security, business center, quiet environment. I almost laughed. Quiet is what the building wanted, because quiet makes it easier to hear when the cameras start watching back. Story 2. The logbook didn't match my handwriting. I took night security work because I liked rules. I liked checklists, clocks, predictable systems that either worked or didn't. The world was complicated enough without bringing mystery home from your job.
The site was a small corporate warehouse and office block, not the kind of place with high-end tenants, just logistics and paperwork and a lot of empty space after dark. My job was to monitor doors, respond to alarms, and do scheduled patrols. Every round got logged in a book that lived on the desk like a quiet judge. Time, location, notes. If something happened, that log was what mattered. On my second week, I started noticing small inconsistencies. I'd finish a round, come back, and see the page slightly shifted, like someone had turned it and turned it back. I'd find the pen cap off when I knew I'd snapped it on. Once I found a small smudge of ink beside the margin, like a fingertip had tested whether the ink was wet. I assumed it was me. Fatigue makes you sloppy, and night shift fatigue is its own kind of fog. I tried to become more careful. Cap the pen, line up the book with the desk edge, write neatly. The first overtly wrong thing happened at 2:02 a.m. I'd just returned from a perimeter check. Everything was locked. No alerts. I wrote, 2 a.m. Perimeter, all secure. Then I stood to make coffee. When I sat back down, the entry wasn't what I'd written. The time was the same. The words were different. The letters were blocky, too perfect, like someone copying the idea of handwriting rather than actually writing. 2 a.m. Perimeter. You walked past me. My skin prickled in a way coffee couldn't fix. I stared at the page for a long time, trying to make the rational explanation fit. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe a coworker was playing a cruel prank. Maybe the day shift supervisor had come by early. I checked the door contacts, everything green. I checked the cameras. Empty corridors, empty loading bay, empty lot. I flipped back through earlier pages, looking for anything similar. All my normal entries, my normal handwriting, my normal, boring reality.
I turned to the newest page again. That line was still there, dark and certain. I did a full sweep after that, flashlight in hand, checking every locked door, every corner, every restroom, every utility closet. The building smelled like cardboard and machine oil and the stale warmth of heaters. Nothing moved, nothing spoke, no one was waiting. When I returned to the desk, the book was open to a new page. I hadn't turned it. On the blank page was a single word: look. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Then, against every instinct, I looked at the monitors. At first, the feeds were normal. Then camera 4, the office corridor, flickered once, and I saw movement at the far end near the stairwell door. A person-shaped figure stood in the shadow, facing the camera. The image quality wasn't great, but enough to see posture. Head slightly tilted, shoulders rounded, as if listening. I leaned closer. The figure didn't move. I rewound the feed 10 seconds. Empty hallway. Live feed again. The figure was there, closer. My throat tightened. I felt the same sick recognition I'd felt the first time I heard an echo answer instead of repeat. This was not a person walking through a building. This was something appearing only when I watched. I kept the feed on live and did not rewind again. I opened the radio channel and forced my voice into professionalism, because professionalism is a kind of armor. Whoever is on site, I said, state your location. Static answered, and underneath it I heard my own voice whisper back, delayed by half a second. State your location. Not a recording, not exactly. The cadence was mine, but the tone was flatter, like my voice without breath. The corridor figure shifted slightly, and for a moment I thought it was coming toward the camera. My hand tightened around the radio. Then the monitors all blinked black for a split second. When they returned, camera 4 showed the corridor empty, but another camera, camera 2, the lobby, now showed the security desk from above, a view I knew didn't exist in our system. I saw myself sitting in the chair, rigid. I saw the logbook open. I saw my hands gripping the radio. And in the corner of that frame, standing where the lobby plant should have been, a tall, dark shape watched me without moving. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body refused to give it the satisfaction of confirmation. Instead, I opened the logbook with shaking hands and wrote, in my own handwriting, slow and deliberate, 3:10 a.m., no visual contact, cameras abnormal, requesting relief. I set the pen down and kept my eyes on the paper. I counted my breaths. I waited for the next message to appear. The ink on my line bled slightly, like the paper had become damp. Then, beneath my entry, new letters formed as if someone invisible was pressing the pen into the page from the other side. Relief is not coming. My mouth went dry. The building's heaters clicked. Somewhere in the walls, something shifted with a sound like a slow sigh. I stood, grabbed my things, and walked out, leaving the logbook open. I didn't run, because running turns fear into permission. I walked steadily, like a person leaving a job, like a person refusing to act hunted. Behind me, in the quiet lobby, the radio crackled once. My voice, again, soft and almost kind. You walked past me. I never went back. A week later, the supervisor called asking why I'd left mid-shift. I told him I had a family emergency. He accepted it too quickly, like he'd heard the excuse before. Months later, I drove past the building in daylight and saw a new security guard's car in the lot. The place looked ordinary, harmless, as if it didn't keep journals. I wondered if the logbook still sat on the desk, and whether the next person would discover what I learned too late. That the building wasn't recording the shift for liability, it was recording it to learn you.
Story 3. The Camera That Showed My Future. The worst part of night security isn't the emptiness. It's the way emptiness makes small things feel intentional.
A door that closes too softly. A light that flickers at the exact moment you look up. Your own footsteps sounding like someone else's because the hall returns them wrong. I was working security for a mid-rise office tower that had been partially renovated and partially abandoned, which meant half the floors were modern and bright, and the other half were stripped down to bare concrete and plastic sheeting. My post was in a glass-walled control room at the back of the lobby, with a clear view of the doors and a wall of monitors that made me feel like I was sitting inside an insect's compound eye. There were rules. There are always rules, even if they're unspoken. Don't leave the lobby unlocked. Don't go into the renovation floors alone unless an alarm forces you to. Don't chase footsteps. Verify on camera first. Don't use the service elevator after 2 a.m. because it stalls sometimes. I didn't break the rules at first. The building broke them for me. It started with camera 11, the hallway outside the service elevator on the 7th floor. That floor was under renovation. No furniture, no staff, no reason for anyone to be there. Yet, at 1:47 a.m., a motion alert pinged and the feed popped up. The corridor was empty, but the lights looked wrong. They were brighter than they should have been, and the shadows were too sharp, like a stage set. Then I saw myself. I was on the screen, walking down that 7th floor corridor toward the service elevator, flashlight in my right hand, radio on my shoulder. The version of me on camera moved with the same slightly stiff stride I have when I'm tired. He paused at the elevator doors and pressed the call button. I stared so hard my eyes watered. I glanced down at my own hands, at the desk in front of me, at the coffee I'd been nursing for an hour. I was still in the lobby. The camera feed continued. On screen, I waited in the corridor, then turned my head slightly, as if hearing something behind the drywall. I raised my flashlight, aiming it toward a dark opening where a door should have been. Then the feed froze for a half second, and the image glitched in the static. When it returned, the corridor was empty again. No me, no movement, no bright stage lighting. Just the dim renovation floor, as it should have been. My first thought was technical, a looped feed. Someone had accidentally patched in old footage. It happens, I told myself. Systems are messy. So I did the thing that seems sensible and never is. I rewound. The playback showed nothing but an empty hallway. It was as if the clip of me had never existed. I returned to live, and there I was again, now closer to the elevator, repeating the same movement, pressing the button, waiting, turning my head. My throat tightened. The sense of being observed turned inside out, because I wasn't watching a person. I was watching myself perform a future I hadn't lived yet. I grabbed the radio and called my supervisor, but it went to voicemail. I called the second guard assigned to the other site across town. No answer. The building felt very sure of my isolation. I kept camera 11 on live, refusing to rewind again. I watched the version of me lift his flashlight and step toward the dark opening. He hesitated as if weighing a choice. Then, on screen, he took one step inside. The corridor lights flickered. The camera image darkened slightly, and for a moment, I could only see the beam of my flashlight disappearing into that doorway. Then, from somewhere deep in the building, I heard a sound that didn't belong in the lobby. A single metallic chime, like an elevator arriving. My stomach dropped. I looked up at the real lobby elevators. Their doors were closed. Their indicator lights were steady. No movement. But the service elevator, the one behind the staff door near the loading bay, made the arrival chime again. It sounded polite, inviting. I didn't want to move. I wanted to stay exactly where I was and let the building do whatever it was doing without involving my body. But another rule lived inside me too, older than training. If an elevator opens on an empty floor, someone can step out. I unlocked the staff door and walked down the service corridor, flashlight beam trembling slightly against the walls. The corridor smelled like dust and paint and that cold scent of spaces under construction. I kept telling myself it was a mechanical glitch, that the elevator was cycling for maintenance. The service elevator doors were open. Inside, the light was on. The panel glowed. The display read 7. I stood in the doorway, staring into the small mirrored box. My reflection looked wrong. Not distorted exactly, but too calm, like it had already decided what would happen next. The mirror made the elevator feel deeper than it was, a little tunnel waiting to swallow the story. My radio crackled once, and I heard my own voice on the channel, quiet and breathless, as if speaking from far away. "Don't come up," my voice said. I froze so hard my spine hurt. "Who is this?" I whispered, even though I knew the answer. The radio hissed. Then the voice repeated, clearer, "Don't come up." On the monitor back at the desk, some part of my mind pictured it without seeing it. I imagined camera 11 showing me walking into that doorway on the 7th floor, and I felt sick with the idea that the building might be pulling me toward the moment it had already shown me. I stepped back from the open elevator. The doors didn't close. They stayed open, patient, as if waiting for me to choose the timeline the building preferred. I forced myself to walk back to the control room. I shut and locked the staff door behind me. I sat at the desk and brought camera 11 up again. The corridor on the 7th floor was empty. Then, slowly, the version of me appeared again, but not walking this time. Standing. Directly in front of the camera lens, so close that the image blurred around his shoulders. He was facing into the camera, head tilted slightly. I couldn't see detail, but I knew it was me, the way you know your own posture in a mirror. He lifted his hand, and he pointed straight out of the frame, as if indicating something beyond the camera's view. Then he opened his mouth and spoke, without audio, but I could read his lips. "Come." My radio crackled again. A softer voice this time, not mine, low and intimate. "It's already happened," it said. The monitors flickered, and for a moment every feed showed the same thing. An empty corridor, endless and identical, stretching away under fluorescent light. Then the normal cameras returned, except camera 1, the lobby camera. It showed the lobby as it was now, empty and still, with me in the control room behind glass. And in the reflection of the lobby doors, where the night outside should have been dark, there was a bright corridor like the one from the 7th floor, superimposed over the glass, as if the building had opened an internal hallway onto the outside world. The corridor in the reflection looked like it led somewhere. I didn't stay to find out where. I left the building before the shift ended, walked into the cold air, and kept walking until I reached a gas station with bright lights and other people. Only then did my hand start to shake, delayed, like my body had been holding it together until it could collapse safely. The next day, I returned with my supervisor, and everything looked normal. The service elevator worked. Camera 11 showed an empty renovation floor. The logs showed no alerts at 1:47 a.m., as if the system itself had decided not to remember. But I remembered, and every time I see myself on a security camera now,
even in a grocery store, even in daylight, I have the sudden, irrational fear that my image will lift its head, look directly at the lens, and show me what I'm going to do next.
Because the scariest thought isn't that the building was haunted. It's that the building could predict me, and that prediction felt like a plan.